And we are presenting the second of the Partner Summer Webinar Series, Elements of the Unified Marketing through Real-Time Visitor Profiles. So I'm going to give it just another moment, not very long at all, but just another moment for people to join in. I see a couple more people are signing in. We're really glad that you joined today. As we're proceeding through, last week was the overarching idea of Tealium and, the product suite and the demonstration. That recording is available online, so if you go to the partner area of Tealium.com, then you'll see the series, and you'll see that register link is now turned into review the recording from last week. This week, we're covering the unified marketing through the real-time visitor profiles idea. And again, we'll record this so that way it's available after we finish this week, and then we can move on to next week, and that's the idea. But I think this is a good time for me to stop delaying any further, and let's proceed on and do a little bit of housekeeping. And I'll pass that to Nicole. Good morning, Nicole. Thanks for hosting and joining us today.
Sure. Thanks for joining, everyone. As Sean mentioned, the session will also be recorded and available for anyone to watch on demand after the webinar. And for the Q&A, if you have any questions during the live session, please go ahead and just type your message into that chat panel at any time. I'll be doing my best to monitor that and answer your questions right away. But at the end of the webinar, we will review all of the questions and share those answers with the larger audience as a whole.
Brilliant. And what we want to cover today is, this is something that's intended for marketers, of course, but we could get a little bit technical, and some of this does get a little more technical. So anyway, just bear with us. If you have any questions, please type those into the chat window, like Nicole said. But what we want to do is come across with a few ideas that we're talking about on the Tealium side that seem to resonate really well with our customers and again with our partners. But the customer data supply chain idea, right? What are the challenges? How are people wrestling with the data? How is it being supplied? What are the delays? What are the implications, right? We're going to cover some of that today. But then also cover the idea of visitor stitching versus visitor linking, because there's a difference there, and some people, customers, competitors do it differently, whereas Tealium does the visitor stitching. So we'll go into those details here in a little bit as well. And then also touch base on the importance of the real-time access to those stitched profiles, right? Because as people change their state, there's an implication there, right? As people are dynamic, they're not static. And so we'll go into the retargeting implications and the remarketing and the personalization. So that's what we'll do. And I see there's still a few more people joining in, but we're going to keep proceeding forward. So, like Nicole was mentioning, I'm heading up the partner enablement side of Tealium. And so any questions that you have, relationship side, we've got Nikki Bonacorsi, we've got Bobby Drummond, we've got Nicole Dune, we've got the whole team, right? John Schaff and group. We have a European team. So the whole idea is we want to make sure that we can meet your needs and your challenges as they come up. So please do reach out as you see fit. And anytime you've got questions, we'll come up with answers. If not, we'll bring in the right people that can come up with those answers. But what we want to do is start off with the idea of a data supply chain. So data supply chain is as there's information flying around the ether, omni-channel data, right? There's omni-channel multi-device data. It could be large screen, right? Everybody's, and not everybody, but I guess a lot of people have web-connected TVs. They were not connected. They're all on different areas. They're different means of connecting. There's different ways of identifying visitors, and it's just not uniform, right? So when you actually get down to the visitor and customer data, beyond just the hits and the events, then there's a big delay, right? A big delay. It's usually end-of-day processing. It's usually having to go to all these different MarTech vendors or all these data collection vendors and pull back the data, and then pull in your data scientists, pull in the team that know how to stitch your data together, and then from there have to figure out what are you going to do, what are you going to latch onto as far as the key, because if all this data is out in the ether, you've got to bring it back down to one source, and reclaiming that is a tedious process at best. But then there's the data preparation and the ETL, right? Extract, transform, and load that into a database. So you can process that into a data warehouse, right? You could have a Teradata or a SaaS instance we want to be a source of data, but we're not going to be the end-all, be-all, right? We're not an enterprise data warehouse by any means. We would be a data source, or data source, of course. But the problem is you can't feed that back to the customer interaction, right? So it's slow. End-of-day access to data is putting you way outside of that window of interaction. You can't get that data in order to take action on it. So the idea of a more modern data supply chain comes to light. And this is where we're working with much faster data, a way of taking the information as it occurs in real time. And sometimes it's real time, sometimes it's right time, right? As fast as we can process it, as fast as the data comes across the wire, there are certain things you could do with it. But as there are big data challenges, if the data is so huge and the data are so numerous, then of course there are processing issues. So we like to say more right time than real time. Real time if it's small data, right time if it's large data. But the customer interaction, as the interaction occurs, if Tealium is that source of data, right? If you've got the data layer, and that data layer is feeding that information that's going on, and it's passing it to the MarTech vendors, now it's happening more in a uniform, streamlined, faster sense. You're getting data from Tealium, from the browser, right, from the digital property, and it's getting out to the technology vendors the way you need it to go. And it's uniform and it's consistent. So as we're then doing another method of analysis, it's not cookie-based, right? Think about Google Analytics as a cookie-based application, and Site Catalyst is cookie-based, and all the traditional web analytic tools cookie-based. Well, that's not going to work any longer, right? It's got to be visitor-based, visitor-centric, customer-consumer data. And it's got to be actionable, and it's got to be fast, right? In that magic window, that magic opportunity of time, we've got to interact with somebody that's interacting with the brand. And sometimes they want to be communicated with by email and receive an offer, or display, or an SMS. If they're on a mobile device, they want to have that mobile look and feel, because that's exactly what they're interacting with, right? That's their device. So as the data are actionable, they're live, there's APIs that we could bring into the mix, right? The two-way data connection that tie in from Tealium over to DoubleClick, over to Optimizely, over to an email service provider. But there's APIs that can say, if this action is occurring, if this visitor meets these criteria, then do something about it, and do something about it right now. So there's a way of taking the data, taking action on the data, and you can see that green arrow under column 3 there is that on that live actionable data, you can feed that back to the site for customer interaction, and you can feed that back to the technology vendors, so that way everybody's on the same page. Your Google and your Site Catalyst reports say the same thing, right? They're on the same page. And the marketing efforts and the email initiatives, everything is on track and in line, because you're dealing with a single source of data. That's what Tealium wants to be, is that single source. There's also, if we move over to column 4, data preparation implications, which is that as there's information, we're not going to focus necessarily on a cookie. We can focus on a social media ID, or we can focus on an email address, or a customer ID, like a frequent flyer number, right? So it doesn't have to be PII, right? We can get away from the email identification if we want to, and move over towards other methods, right? If there's a customer ID, if there's online gaming and they've got their online gaming handle, well, then let's use that and identify that as the method and means to understand who an individual is as they're interacting with the brand. But then that data we can feed, right? We can take that, extract that data, provide it in a couple different ways. One is through a JSON type of a textual format, right? We can pass that along in a data object or in text, and then that text can be processed, right? It can be, we can put it, we take that text information, we can put it in a destination of the customer's choice. The customer's choice could be an Amazon Web Services directory, like an S3 bucket or something. It could be a secure FTP destination of the customer's choosing, or as you're a partner, it could be your location, right? You might provide this value to your customers, so they don't have to, right? That's what they pay you for. So if you want us to send the data over to you, provide us a user ID, password, and an IP address, and we can send the data securely your direction, so you can analyze it or provide reporting, analysis, customized dashboards the way you see fit. Right? That's data processing, and we could put it into a data warehouse if you want. We could put it into Redshift if we want to use that as a common data point. But that way it feeds and communicates to an enterprise data warehouse, right? We're not the SaaS, we're not the Teradata of the world. We're not the organization that's going to be pulling in all the data sources and dealing with really large, super huge detail for grocery store chains and the largest e-commerce retail centers around the planet. We're going to be a data feed into that enterprise data warehouse, but a very valuable one. And again, once it gets to the enterprise data warehouse detail, we know more about that person. If we get into the business intelligence and the data mining, right, if we're feeding systems that you want to use and leverage like Looker, or if you want to use Tableau for that matter, Splunk does a really great means of analysis as well. Well, notice that any of those customer interactions, those customized details, that personalized information, right? We want to be very respectful of who a consumer and who a customer is. Well, those details, again, in this modern data supply chain, can feed back to item one, the customer interaction and the brand, right? Through the digital means, if it's a tablet or a laptop or a mobile app. And it also takes that data and feeds that back out through the pixels to the marketing vendors. And so that's the idea. Fast, right time interaction, and just to take kind of a case study and apply it here, we've got customers that know there's a magic window of opportunity. If someone is on the site and they're interacting with a brand right now, they've got, someone might be on the site, they indicate that they're looking at a particular product and they leave the site. Well, you've got a window of opportunity. It could be 25 minutes, it could be an hour and 5 minutes. The customer knows exactly what that is. If you have a way of communicating back and serving all of the display advertisements uniformly and interact through email and other means, but you can do it within that magic window of time, say 30 minutes or 60 minutes, well, now you're on the right track, because that's going to drive that conversion rate, that likelihood of success, through the roof, right? And one of our customers saw that they had a 66% chance of likelihood that if they interacted within an hour, that or if they interacted within the hour, then it was a 66% chance of likelihood that person would convert. So just a thought there. Another thought is visitor stitching, which is way more accurate than visitor linking. So differentiator of Tealium's is that as people are interacting with a mobile device, tablet, multiple machines, right, home work, laptop, whatever the case is, Tealium is actively processing and stitching together that individual, right? So as partners, as organizations that are providing insight to customers, we're going to say, okay, identify, what is that main identifier that we're going to use as that key to identify a person? When we understand what that is, Tealium has that technology, right? You don't have to go build this now, but we have the technology to process who that individual is, so that way we can stitch together their cross-platform behavior. Now, we're not linking, so let me walk you through an exercise of linking that activity and how it goes sideways. Because if we take into account a forgotten password scenario, right, if someone is on a laptop and they're at work and they start a process, right, they're looking at some particular item, they're wanting to move forward, they save that to their cart, and then you know what, they start the process, but now it's prompting them on step 3 to log in. Oh, what's my password? I don't know. I didn't save it in my browser, so I've got to go look that up, but I forgot what it is, and right now I don't have time. Lunch is over, whatever the case happens to be. Well, I need to reset my password and then come back to this later. So later, I receive my password, it's reset by email, and now I can see that email on my mobile device, of course, but then I'm going to click to confirm, typical process. But now what we've got is a series of events that are occurring, right? We've got a conversion funnel process that's happening. We're using multiple devices because it's on my mobile device as opposed to my laptop where I started. And then, as I confirm my identity, again, I don't have time for this, so I'll address this later on in the evening. So when I get home, have some dinner, afterwards I switch to my tablet. Now I get back to the site, I enter my new password that I realize now because I've been reminded, and then I complete the process. Well, now this is 3 different visits across 3 different devices by one individual, and so let's do the math. If we're talking about 5 particular events, right, I'm looking at some detail in a product, and I'm resetting my password through email, and I'm switching back to complete the purchase process. Say there's 5 events. However, I've done it effectively over what could be 3 visits, right, depending on your definition, right, 3 different sessions. Each one of them had 30 minutes of inactivity across the wire. However, if we're stitching an individual, then we can understand that that is actually one visitor visit, right? That's one person that's interacting with that device or that brand. So that way, we're stitching together. Tealium is accurately stitching together that Sean came to the website, did several actions, but it's still the same person, right? Improves the attribution and the understanding. So was it really page views of 7 per visit? Not necessarily. It could have been 25, right? Because I could have been on the site clicking around as I continue this across devices, and this is the rule that we want to set up and establish with our customer, then I'm still one visitor. It sees me as one visitor, but there's 25 page views in the visit, and there's still one conversion. But now let's look at the math. If I spent $100, but I had 5 events in that visit, then the converting visit, 100%, right? That's one visitor visit, 100%. But if it's linking me across one device, linking me across another, linking me across a third device, that's 3 different visits. So that could be a different percentage of $100 over 3 visits, or 33%. That's not a $33 conversion rate per visit. It should still be per one person, one visit, knowing that that's one person stitched across devices. That is a one purchase, one conversion for $100. Is it a keyword conversion? Well, you know what? I started the purchase process. I might have started with a keyword, but if you do the linking, your keywords and any of the search terms you provide, they're going to get lost in the shuffle unless you're using stitching. And then the visit duration is measured accurately, right? And the journey is tracked successfully. And so that's the idea. Stitching is a way for Tealium, right? We're doing this in the Tealium Data Cloud. Up in our cloud is understanding who an individual is based on an identified key, and then understanding that person across their different devices. I'll go into that live momentarily. But it really drives the accuracy. It really drives the understanding about an individual. What is their lifetime value? How important are they? Things along those lines drives the accuracy, and that's why visitor stitching is way more accurate than linking. Also, we've got an idea about segmentation, right? Understanding more about that individual, right? We want to be respectful of that person's time, and we understand that marketers say that the data fragmentation is the biggest issue related to data today, right? And not many are able to get that unified view of their customer, and that's what we want to provide. We want to solve that business challenge because it's hard to do, and there's not many that are doing that, right? So as we're talking about a 360-degree view, we might consider it a 360 me, right, and a 360 you. We want to have an understanding of different individuals behaving differently, performing different things, having different interests, but we want to tie together all of the systems so that way everything's working on the same page, right? So let's take into account fragmented profiles on the left. If we're talking about fragmented profiles, as someone might visit from a laptop, well, now we've got them as a particular identifier, right? A 4677810, whatever, right? You've got a different profile because you accessed a different device, and there's a cookie that's there, and that's lending to some of the confusion for a fragmented profile. And then if someone is, again, acting by a mobile device, and they're looking at different products because they're looking for, say, Mother's Day or something for an anniversary or something, well, then they could be considered, well, they're looking at women's category, so that could be a female person. Maybe it's going to infer that that person is female. So that orange line there on the left side says, oh, they're looking at women's category stuff, so let's consider they're in the women's category. But you know what? Later on a tablet, it's Father's Day, or there's some other action that says, I'm going to get something that happens to deal with, I don't know, shoes of a particular kind, or some shirts or something like that. But now that you're looking at that particular category, there's a cookie there. It's listening to what you did on that device, but everything is fragmented. Everything's just a piece of the picture. So you can't really understand more about that visitor because there's no way to tie it together. Now, if we are using Audience Stream, then Audience Stream, once you get in there and you define the means or the key or the method of identifying who a person is, right? It could be their frequent flyer ID. It could be their catalog ID. It could be some means, some social media ID if you wanted it to be, some means that's much stronger than a cookie. Well, then that's going to help understand an individual and generally across their devices, right? So as they're accessing and looking at different products and categories across devices, there's no inference that's occurring. There's no 27% thinking that it's a female and they're kind of interested in this other thing, and they might live in a neighborhood, or they might own their home or something along those lines. Lots of inference occurs. Well, how about if we take away that mystery and we really stitch it together with Audience Stream? Hinging on a key, now we know that's that same person that's looking to buy gifts for certain holidays. And it doesn't matter if you're in a women's category or men's category or kids category, you have a better understanding of who that person is. And with that visitor stitching, you get that clear picture of that visitor to then leverage across all your platforms. Let me draw this other picture. There are other applications that say they do segmentation. Well, of course they do, right? But if you're doing the segmentation, then it can be improved, right? The segmentation, the traditional segmentation is saying, let's take all of your population of visitors over on the left side, and let's understand something about them, right? Let's group them into categories. The problem with this is it's static, right? So if someone is in group 1, they're kind of stuck in group 1, and they're going to be associated with group 1, and that's just what's going to happen. They're a group 1 segment, and maybe they're a group 2, but they're going to be stuck. But this is a dynamic world. People could change their status. So I'm looking at a product, and then I add it to my cart, and I complete a checkout process. I've gone from a prospective customer to an actual customer. Well, how does this segmentation over on the left take that into account as I just changed my state from someone who spends $0 to spending $501, right? If I spend more than $500, that might qualify me for a big spender badge or something. So traditional segmentation, simplistic segmentation, that's running out of gas. That's getting old, and it's miscategorizing, well, I was going to say people, but it's not really taking people into account, is it? So let's talk about the dynamic segmentation over on the right side. With an understanding of who an individual is, then person 1 there in the column could be a big spender, and they've added something to their shopping cart, and they prefer movies. Well, now we have a way of badging and understanding an individual, and it's different than the person in the blue shirt that says, you know what, they haven't really spent any money, but they have tweeted about us on social media, they've added something to their cart, but they haven't completed. So I'm going to treat that individual completely differently. And at the moment that person does change their status in the shopping cart, they complete their purchase on their mobile device or their laptop, well, that person's status changes. They're not lumped into the traditional segmentation on the left side statically about being group 2 and always being associated with group 2. We know what's going on with that person in the right time, that magic window of opportunity to take action on the data. What's the search term? What's the product categories of interest? Do we want to offer a special offer? Let's do something about that. So if we know who that individual is, what they've done, what their interest is, we can tie that all together to say, let's communicate with person 1 through email. That's their preferred means and method they've declared, right? And then with person number 2, maybe there's a CRM method, and we'll use some chat, right? We can do a chat window session, or we can use some other means to contact them. But this brings to that idea of that 360 me, 360 you idea. It's that full picture, right? And if we know who this person is, then we can have that bigger picture of the individual. We can do visitor, not cookie, visitor-based analysis, and we can feed other systems, right? Enterprise data warehouses, action systems, display advertising, and the like. But let me focus on one more thing here before I switch off of this and move to the live interface, which is if we are that one source of data, then it's a way of helping out with the atmospheric marketing, if you will, right? This atmosphere, what is the big picture marketing? How are we interacting with individuals? How do we take them into account? And then how do we use a consistent means of understanding and communicating with an individual, showing them something consistent, but then once they convert, right, once they register, once they've downloaded that item that we want them to download, then how do we get that into the system so that way everybody's on the same page? Everybody is being treated individually. Everybody has an action method, but it's all in an atmospheric sense, right? So if we're that source of data, you're getting away from that disconnected, disjointed means where over here in this audience application A, they've got one segment and being treated differently. Then over here in this testing and targeting area for optimization, they're being treated differently. If Tealium's that one single source everybody's on the same page for optimization, personalization, email service providers, analytics for that matter, right? So think about it from bottom up, right? If we're one source of data, we're feeding up out into the cloud and the atmospheric marketing to treat each individual the way they want to be treated. Timely, relevant, respectfully. That's the goal. So let me move over to the live interface. Let me show you a couple of things that I put together. We'll show the visitor stitching live in action. And so we will get over to the web browser. Let me highlight here the site that I want to use. This is going to be Tealium e-commerce. Tealium e-commerce is a Magento type of an application. I think last week I went through some of the things I use to look at a site and understand more about the site. You know, Ghostery is one of those, where Ghostery helps understand what pixels, tracking pixels exist on the web page. But I also leverage BuiltWith. BuiltWith is an application to understand, you know, Apache is the web server. The e-commerce platform is Magento, right? So we work with Magento very well. So this is a nice fit if someone's using. We also work well with Demandware and Hybris. So organizations that are using these particular types of platforms we snap into very, very well. You can see this is a PHP framework and so forth. BuiltWith is a great application. And then also I've got the Tealium tools that if you go to the Chrome store, then you type in Tealium, you can come up with a way of understanding and investigating the website and figure out that when was the last time we published a change, what account and profile is being used, what tags are firing on this page from the Tealium account. And so a good data discovery application is Tealium Web Companion, even if someone doesn't use Tealium as their tag management provider, you could still use the Tealium tools. Here's a place that I can access. I can perform actions. I can access across my mobile device and different devices, right? So if I log in, and I want to log in through a different login than my typical one, and I will do it like this. I'll use one of my legacy logins. And as I log in, we've identified that is the thing we want to listen for to understand what an individual, who an individual is, right? So we're going to leverage this. I'll save that password. That sounds good to me. But now I've logged in. It recognizes me in the upper right corner. And so as I go to certain categories, right, I want to go see what's on sale, view all the sale items. I'm going to move through. I'm going to create a couple of actions. I want to say I'm going to look at this Oxford shirt, view the details, you know, click around, make some selections, add it to my cart, move through a process, right? But I'm doing this on my laptop, right? So now that I can proceed to checkout, I will start the process. I will continue to ship to a particular address, right? Ground method, no gift wrapping, cash on delivery, and now my order review, right? So I'm not going to click the place order yet, but I'm going to complete that process over on my mobile device. So now I've got an item in my cart, but I haven't quite purchased it yet. And so on my mobile device, I can switch over and I can make sure I log in with the same user ID that I've identified, right? So it could be that same Sean identifier. I'll hit login. And then as I go on my mobile device, now what I was going to do is I have a connector called Reflector that shows my mobile device, but if I switched over from a hardline over to my Wi-Fi, then it was kind of putting at risk the capability of me switching out of the GoToWebinar session, and it was going to disconnect me. So I didn't turn on the Reflector, but sometimes in some of my demos and our conversations, you'll see how I do that. But as I view my order, I complete the process over here. Let's keep going. Orders. And where's the complete process? What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the live data, right? I just want to make sure it's successful, first of all. And of course, I misclicked it, but I wanted to complete that process. So let's go see what we've got for the data, right? So if I log into Tealium, and I want to end my session, but I'll log back in successfully, I'll go to Tealium IQ, and I log in, right? The tag management piece is foundational. The data object, declaring and understanding products and SKUs, quantities, all of the different pieces of the data, right? Meta tags, query string parameters, and the like. Well, they're all defined as that what's going on the platform. But when I switch over to who, audience stream, then audience stream is that place of understanding, tying together and identifying who is that person. And that person is defined, if I go to enrich and attributes, then I can declare listening for a person because I identify my visitor ID right here, right? So I say visitor ID, listen for that login on the page, and then that way it's going to understand across multiple devices, this is the visitor ID. This will be the key, the means of listening for a person across their different devices. And if I go to, where's my ID? UID, user ID, let's do that, user ID. We can listen for that page event where the UID exists, right? So that's one of the definitions. It could be created from a parameter. It could be created from the code that's on the page, whatever the case happens to be. But now that we're able to understand and stitch an individual together, let's make sure that the data are coming through the system in a live fashion. Right now, this is a sample site, right? This is Tealium e-commerce, just a demo site, so there's going to be very little traffic on it. It might just be me and maybe one or two other people. So I'm not expecting huge data volumes. I'm not expecting to see 20 or 30,000 visitors for that means, but there are going to be a few people that are on the page, right? I was on the site here, and as I click around, and we've done several things, then I'm going to see that here in audience stream shortly, or should anyway. And that way the data come across, and we'll see that in different segments. But if I have, did I linger too long? Perhaps I'm expecting to see some data come up a little faster than this. But let me see if I can get the API data running. Now, this is the part where, for the audience, right, for our partners and so forth, this is the part where it gets a little technical. So I don't want to lose the audience here, but I do want to show you what it looks like when the information comes across in a live feed across multiple devices, right? And that's the point. So we're not going to go into understanding exactly what all this text data is, but I will highlight a couple points out of the data because it is very relevant to this atmospheric marketing idea. It is relevant to the understanding of about a 360me, 360u profile type of analysis. Let me kick the system back into, because I know I was looking at this earlier, and it did say I needed to refresh my session, so I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to refresh my session. I'm going to log out, log back in, switch over to Audience Stream. Make sure I get my live data coming through as I expect it. I want the badges and the detail. And again, there's audience stream training that's specific to understanding what are all the different capabilities, right? How do you identify a badge? How do you identify a segment? How do you build the rules to trigger an action, right? And so we'll go through the audience stream training at a different time. This has to do with understanding about an individual and stitching the activity and the behavior together to take action on that. So on this site presently, we've got a number of badges, right? A cart abandoner. Well, you know what? That's me, right? And a privacy hound and a wish list user and aviator sunglasses fan. So I'm the only person on this demo site presently. So I'm one visitor, but I have performed every single one of these actions over time as I've accessed this site. And so as I've looked at the sale category, as I've spent, on this site, I don't know where they get these prices, but it's pretty easy to spend more than $1,000 on this particular demo site. But, big spenders. Well, that's me. That's an understanding about which category and classification this one person fits across these different segments, including a multi-device user. So now that I've seen the data across the wire, let me bring up the live feed about what's going on behind the scenes that we are actively, A, listening, right, dynamically. It's not something that's batched and kind of collected until the end of the day, right? End of the day, batching, end of the day, data collection, end of the day, digestion and analysis doesn't cut it anymore. It's when someone is on the website presently, when there's information happening right now, we want to take action on that. When someone switches from looking at a particular product to buying that, or if they're they're reading an article to subscribing to that news service, then we want to take action on that data in real time when it's live. Now the problem is, since there's not a lot of action and activity on this website, then it does need data. And as you know, as partners, you guys know that if we've provided you an audience stream account, we advise you not to put it on the demo website. We tell you to put it on your real website, because that way you've got enough data that come through to take action on the data and see it going in real time, right? So now if I switch over to audience stream, I'm expecting some of the detail to come up, and that live data would come up, but it would be doing some stitching, right? Across multiple devices, it's going to feed up into the Ether. If I have to switch accounts, then I will. To something that has a little bit more data. But if someone's logging into the site and then it's going up in the Tealium Data Cloud, we're understanding more about who an individual is, their behaviors, their actions, and so forth. And now let me let something that's got a little more data, a little more traction, I'm going to let this collect the information, and that way I can start showing you a different pieces and parts of what I'm looking for. Number one is I can do a find here. I'm going to see if I find my user ID. Nope, it's not in there yet. So I'll give it a little bit longer to build, right? We're only looking at 7 visitor records, right? 7 visitor records that have an overarching identifier, right? Up in our database, we've got this one master record ID that we're understanding that this person across multiple devices, well, they all have to roll up, those IDs have to roll up to some sort of a master list. Now we're up to 43, 47 visitor records. And we're understanding a bit more. Now there's 49. Let me do a little find here and see if I can find. Yep, there we go. Now it's starting to come together. Notice I did a find for my name, and now I've got, well, I didn't pause it, so let me stop the query there and let me run that one more time. All right, so number one, based on my login, I can understand who an individual, stop that, Sean Dot. And understand who an individual is based on their login. And remember, it doesn't have to be an email address, or it could be frequent flyer, it could be social media, it could be something along those lines. But then also, back up to where I was, we can have a series of secondary IDs, right? As someone else might log in with not just their work ID, but it might be logging in as their personal ID or social media ID or Google Plus or whatever. Then we can start figuring out who are these individuals across their multiple IDs. So we can do stitching of devices and IDs through a cookie, if you will. Now we've got my ID, but what I also want to show you is the devices, right? So what we're looking at here is based on an individual and their login. Well, someone is using, you know, Safari and Chrome multiple browsers, right? So you can use multiple browsers, IE, Safari, Chrome. You know, I've got a tablet that uses Silk as a browser, right? It's an Android device and it uses Silk, and so you'd see that listed here. And as people are accessing across their Windows machine, but then also a Mac OS X device like a laptop, but then an iOS mobile device, well, now you're seeing an individual person across their devices. And the importance of this is now we're listening for search terms, you know, back to our idea of someone searching for a particular product in a search term, maybe on their mobile device, but then later on, they're accessing their account through their Windows machine to continue the process or update their password. But then once they've performed that, maybe later on they complete that process on their tablet or their laptop or whatever the case happens to be. But it's one individual across devices that we can take action on, right? Who is that person that has looked at particular documents, that's looked at particular pages, looked at particular products? How do they prefer to be interacted with, right? How do we want to understand their browsers? Let me go back to the flags, right? Have I registered for something? True. Have I created something or performed an action? True. Have I performed something within the last 24 hours? False, right? So we can start flagging and building these segments and these identifiers based on rules to then say, I know this individual has done these certain things, there's expiration, there's timeout, something's occurred over the last 10 minutes or over the last session or over the last 24 hours, but you're able to take action in that right time system. And you're able to, again, in a timely and relevant means, you're able to be respectful of that individual. It's 2015. We got to make sure that what we're doing is doing something, number one, better than our competition, but number two, honoring the privacy rules and expectations that our consumers and customers are expecting from us. So again, you can build all these flags, you can understand the attributes, the traits, the funnels, if you will. You build all this in Tealium. That's foundational as far as understanding an individual across the 360 me, 360 you type of an idea. What is that picture? And then this can be presented in a couple of different ways. Number one, textual JavaScript object notation. Second, we could feed a database. We can feed Redshift. So that way you can tie in your database tools to Redshift, right? Because pretty much every database on the planet now has a connector to Amazon's Redshift. And that way we get it to Redshift, you're able to pick that up and you're able to feed it. And every time there's an action that takes place or there's some sort of conversion or some status changes, right then and there, it updates Redshift, and Redshift feeds whatever you're using to make sure that the point of sale systems are up to date and true, making sure that the action systems for advertising or email service providers all true, the optimization and personalization, everything's on the same page, right? That atmospheric marketing to that individual is all true and correct. And then sometimes if we've got information about an individual and it talks about them being a person that is a $5,000 spender, however they might have returned some products, well, we have a way of bringing in that offline data so that way we can true up this visitor specific profile. If they bought $5,000 worth of product but then they returned it, right? They bought a international plane ticket but then they canceled that reservation. Well, you might not know that necessarily unless you tie in your offline data through omnichannel, and you can add that data, you can send that to us. And that definition would come across as a CSV file. So you can pass us a CSV file. We'll provide you a user ID and a password. You send that to us. We'll map that email address or that login or that consumer frequent flyer number and all of their attributes, right? What was the product that was returned? What date was that? And so all of the attributes, right, that supplement the understanding of that visitor, right? This is all visitor-based, action-based. So whatever the attributes are, you're mapping the columns about this particular tactic, this particular product, this particular lifetime value amount can be augmented hinging upon this individual's key, their login, and then that way the offline data can be brought into Tealium so that way that visitor profile is more true and accurate and correct. And then what do you do with it? You take action on this, and that way you can do several things, right? Again, send it to DoubleClick through Ad Exchange bid managers. You can send it to Facebook advertising for targeted remarketing, right? But if Tealium has that one true segmentation application that everybody's operating off of, then everybody's on the same page, all the reports look the same, and you don't have to wait till the end of the day to get the data and process the information, right? One person across all of their different facets, that's what we're looking to do. So if I talk about, in summary, right, cross-device profiles. They might be doing certain things on different devices. If you're leveraging cookies or if you're leveraging different technologies, for that matter, right? There could be segmentation technologies, targeting technologies, email technologies. They all operate off of segmentation, but they don't talk to each other. If you're using Tealium as that foundation and you build the segment in Tealium, then that feeds all of those action systems, and they're all on the same page and they're all talking to each other. At least they're operating off the same data source, right? But that gives you that clear picture of your visitor, and then you can leverage that to operate in a more timely, more relevant sense. For that, for all those technologies, you're tying those all together into that atmospheric marketing idea. So that's where we want to pause, and then I want to ask Nicole for some of the questions that might be in the Q&A panel. Nicole, what are some of those questions that have to do with the topic?
Well, our first question, Sean, our only question today is, does the stitching only work for visitors that have signed in? If not, how does the stitching actually connect to different devices?
Very good question. The visitor stitching does take some sort of authentication means to identify an individual, and it's got to be something that's consistent across devices. So does it take a login? Yeah, it takes a login, like a consumer ID, a customer ID, a catalog ID, something that's been signed to that individual. You can use an email address as well, sometimes social media works, right? Think about a Facebook ID where pretty much the only time you've ever logged into Facebook is when you access your mobile device, or when you try and bring on like your tablet or something like that, right? You're only going to address the login for Facebook one time, and then it's very hard to log out if you ever wanted to. But that is a consistent identifier across devices that is going to be a GUID, right? A unique identifier, but it's not necessarily PII. Same thing with Google+, same thing with other means of authentication across devices that's not an email address. But it does take some hard-coded authentication, because then there's no inference. There's not guesswork to say, well, 27% of the time we think Sean is female and living in this group of apartments according to this other zip code and high school degree, right? So there's no inference in supposition. If someone's logging in, you know who they are. It's guaranteed, and you can understand more about that individual. But it does take that login. So that's a great question. Nicole, what else we got?
That was our only question for the day.
Oh, spectacular. Yeah, and that's a common question too, which is, can we leverage other IDs, right? Are there some sort of audience manager IDs, or are there some other IDs that can be built in some other system? Absolutely, we can leverage that. And to expand on this a little bit more, we can tie in multiple IDs, right? So if we consider everything a secondary ID, we can, maybe there's no email address, but there's a social media ID 1 and a social media ID 2 and maybe an audience segmentation management ID 3. Well, all of these things can be connected together, right? Because it's still the same person on a machine, but we could tie these secondary IDs together as well to leverage that. So that gives us a much better picture about an individual, leveraging other IDs from other systems to come up with that more true picture of an individual. And that is the idea about bringing together, a platform with segments to feed the ether, to come up on that atmospheric marketing idea, to take action in right time without waiting to the end of the day, to tie this all together. So, well, Nicole, was that it for the questions? I think we're done there.
That was it. Mm-hmm.
Well, there we are. All right. Well, then, partners, thank you very much for attending today. I hope this was valuable, right? We want to tie together those visitor profiles and treat everybody uniquely. And then that also ties together some of the other ideas that we have in subsequent weeks. So like next week, we'll talk about mobile, right? How specifically do we look at mobile? How do we get into mobile? What are the libraries that we have in mobile? What devices do we support? So we're going to bring in some subject matter experts and authorities in the field there for next week. And again, we'll go into deeper dives, weeks 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I just wanted to thank you guys all for your time, and wish you a great rest of the week, and then we'll see you next week. So Nicole, thank you for everything, and thank you for covering the Q&A, and look forward to chatting with you next week. Thanks, partners.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Thanks all.